Good sound? Excellent, excellent. So I feel a little bit like, where do they use these really long microphones? Is it like Jeopardy or something like that?
Yeah.
Price is Right.
Oh, yeah.
Parker, yes. Price is Right. Anyway, my name is Christopher Morgan. I'm with the City of Charleston planning staff. And we are so thankful to have you all here tonight to help us with some envisioning of our corridors in West Ashley. And we're excited to work with a consultant team here at Dover Cole as part of our zoning ordinance effort, along with Clarion and other associated consultants that are going to create a fantastic new zoning ordinance for West Ashley. And we are excited to get y'all's input into some of these more detailed corridors that we want to work on. I also want to bring up here the project manager with the city for the zoning ordinance, Philip Overcash, just to say hello so you all see him. He'll be here throughout the week here too. And
hello everyone, my name is Philip Overcash. I work with the City of Charleston's Planning Department. So I've been the project manager now for the zoning code rewrite, which is kind of the overall process that we're here for. This, looking at our corridors, shaping our corridors, this form-based, in quotes, code for this area is only one aspect of our zoning code rewrite, and we're looking at it in a couple of different places. One is here in the Sam Britt, a little bit of St. Andrews, a little bit of Savannah Highway area, and we're also looking at Maybank Highway on Johns Island. If you're interested in participating in that, that will be in late August. It'll be a similar format. Charrette is this, just looking at specifically kind of the Maybank area. With that, I think what we'll do is we'll just launch right into our presentation. We've got our zoning code rewrite consultants.
Thanks, Philip. And as Philip mentioned, my name is Steve Postma. I'm one of the town planners and urban designers with Dover Cole and Partners. Hopefully we don't encounter any more technical issues than the whole global scene is experiencing at the moment, but we'll see. So a quick rundown of our agenda for tonight. We'll kick things off with some introductions of the team that's working behind the larger project, as well as the schedule, the charrette schedule for this week, and the opportunities on Johns Island, like Philip alluded to. We're going to spend some time with a section kind of entitled Food for Thought, a little bit of an educational on form-based codes. If you're not familiar, this will be an opportunity to kind of learn a little bit more about them, as well as opportunities for West Ashley that are emerging as part of the recent code assessment and what we are working on as part of tonight's work. So the next stage will be working in small groups, and that is where we really want to spend the big chunk of tonight as well, is to really give everybody an opportunity to express your thoughts, mark up our maps that you're seeing in front of the tables there. We're going to have some table facilitators that will help to ask some questions and really drive some great conversation. But please don't hesitate to start making some marks on the maps. You should have a few feedback forms that are on the table as well in case you have some initial thoughts that you just want to make sure you get out. Please make sure you get those down and hand it to one of our team members before we leave. And then at the end, there's going to be a report back session. So one representative from each table is going to have to step up and just share basically the three big ideas that have emerged from your table. We'll speak a little bit more of that later. So as part of the larger zone code rewrite, Clarion is the lead consultant here. And tonight, Dover Cole and Partners, our team is helping to run the charrette workshop, both on West Ashley, and then we will also be coming back for Johns Island next month. Tonight we also have representatives from Kittleson Associates, Beal Engineering, and Horsley Witten Group. So they'll be posted up around the room and can help to answer certain questions that perhaps our team isn't able to answer. So as we look at the larger project, it's been going on for a little bit over a year now. We're about halfway through that process. The new code is beginning to start getting drafted and worked on based on the code assessment that was just completed in the spring. And then concurrently, we're starting to work on this form-based code element to go hand in hand. That will then get looped into the larger project. And as I mentioned, the code assessment that wrapped up in the spring really identified some of the constraints that are within the existing zoning code, as well as opportunities and areas for improvement. And so, if you're interested, the website, which I'll make sure is posted up here tonight, has more information, and you can access the full report and start to read through some of more of the common and emerging themes that were found. In terms of opportunities, one element was the idea or the concept of form-based districts, evaluating the potential for how form-based districts along key city corridors can provide context-sensitive regulations. And as part of that process, we worked very closely with Clarion as well as the team over at the city, and we identified 2 areas in which to focus our efforts and be able to create these community engagement workshops that we're doing here tonight. The first being along Sam Rittenberg on West Ashley, and then the second along Maybank Highway on Johns Island. So why the reason for form-based districts, and what are the benefits ultimately that can be coming out of this versus conventional zoning? Well, for one, it allows us to establish a future desired form. You know, we can actually come up with what the fundamental form of building heights and setbacks can look like, as well as architectural design standards. You know, from facade composition to the arrangement of doors and windows and creating, you know, memorable, enjoyable spaces. It can also be utilized in different contexts, you know, such as historic or town center districts and creating standards that are going to help to protect and reinforce existing contexts, or perhaps more like Sam Rittenberg and more suburban single-use corridors where there's opportunities to retrofit walkable neighborhood centers. And lastly, as part of form-based districts, they're typically created through desired community vision, through events like tonight that help to gather and synthesize feedback from the community as to what they want to see the form of their community look like. So, in terms of how we landed on these 2 locations, we used various elements or criteria. Primarily, it consisted of areas of higher elevation. You know, in the long term, we want to concentrate the growth in those areas, as well as future land use designations. So, working closely with the city and their larger city plan as to areas that have been identified for as city centers, neighborhood edge, where density and intensity is expected to grow over the long term. As well, aligning things with commercial corridors, particularly in the case of Sam Rittenberg, aligning with the redevelopment area, the TIF district, and then borrowing off of recent studies and plans. I'll touch on that in a second as well. But briefly looking at the future land use, when we start to narrow that down into the city centers and neighborhood edge areas, you can see how that starts to narrow the field of the areas that we're looking at. And when we layer that with areas of higher elevation, you can see how that starts to stand out from how we arrived at our 2 locations. So for the charrette workshop this week, we're obviously commencing with the community input session tonight. We actually will be on site in this same location for the next couple days, from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. tomorrow and 9 to 6 on Wednesday. It will be an open planning studio, so we encourage you to please come on by. Just posting that up there. So over the next 3 days, located here. Our team will also be back in August for a very similar process on Johns Island, that location to be decided, and then a wrap-up or work-in-progress review session scheduled for August 29th, and that location still TBD. In terms of the next 2 days, we actually have coordinated and arranged for several stakeholder meetings to focus on certain topics. And again, if any of these appeal to you, please feel free to come by. You can sit in and be a part of the conversation. But tomorrow, focusing on housing and community development, transportation and mobility, environment and green infrastructure, arts, culture, and preservation, as well as the local business community. And on Wednesday, meeting with county representatives and planning and zoning. Again, just touching on August. And then wrapping up at the end of August with our work in progress, which will encapsulate all of the work that we're doing here tonight, as well as the work that will be done at the end of August on the island. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Dover of Dover Poland Partners.
Thanks, Steve. All right, how many veterans of the West Ashley planning process, Plan West Ashley, recognize that photograph taken right out here in the food court when we wrapped up a similar process a few years ago? Well, that plan was one of those recent plans and studies that Steve spoke about. And the Plan West Ashley set out an ambitious future for this part of the city, a future that you can only realize if you fix the zoning and fix the streets and fix a lot of other things. But fixing the land development regulations is one of the missions set in motion by Plan West Ashley just a few years ago. And then reinforced again when the city's overall city plan, 2021, Christopher, is that right? Was adopted for the city as a whole. So we're just implementing in this work on what that called for. Now, we get places that we love from design, not from numbers. So discussions about zoning are often very abstract. How many dwelling units and density dwelling units per acre? What's the floor area ratio? And so on. And what we realize is that those numbers don't really determine whether we end up with a place people love or one they just more or less have to tolerate. What makes a difference is design. So in the form-based codes, we move design to the front of the discussion. We don't really get beautiful cities from the Easter Bunny or from Santa Claus. We get them from drawing lines on a map and saying, let's put California Street this way, or let's make Avondale that way. And so this continues that tradition. Now I'm going to talk a little bit and give you some food for thought on what we mean when we say form-based codes. Some of you know this already, so I'll go quickly. Look at these two pictures. These are essentially the same thing. On a typical zoning map, they would both show up as some sort of bright red color or reddish-orange color as commercial development or commercial zoning. But they're wildly different. And they're different partly because of the way the stuff between buildings, like streets and open spaces, have been designed or configured by the agencies in charge of those. And they are different because of where the buildings sit on their lots. And the difference between a place that feels like one where you might want to get out of your car, keep your car keys in your pocket and walk around, and a place where it feels like if you're not driving, you're doing it wrong, is in a way the building to street relationships that come from where the buildings sit in their lots. So one of the most important things we deal with in form-based codes is that building to street relationship. Why is that important? Because all of us, you know, we live our lives in community in the spaces between buildings. But those big public rooms, our streets, walkable or not, are really given their shape by the privately developed buildings. In a scene like this one, where the street is like a public room, its walls are the private buildings. The floor is where you have sidewalks or where you have parking spaces, driving, street trees and so on. Maybe those street trees form a kind of ceiling, but the walls of that public space, of that room, are determined by the position of the buildings and how they relate to it. So we like to say the public realm, where all our memories are formed, where our attraction to a place is established, gets its shape mainly from private buildings, which is why we regulate them. Now that's not a new idea. The idea of carefully regulating the form of the city, not just the density and dwelling units, or the land use, or intensity of development, but the form of it is not a new idea. In fact, from colonial times up to the 1940s, it was kind of common in the United States to use these sorts of regulations. Some of you probably know, historically, the King of Spain issued a set of laws called the Laws of the Indies, which were used to form all the new towns by the Spanish colonists. Something similar was used by the colonists in places like Alexandria, Virginia, where a young surveyor named George Washington drew the plan, and they set rules. They had 4 or 5 simple design-oriented rules that give you Alexandria. So it's not a new idea. It's something that's been quite common and has really a real comeback in the last 25 years. There are 2 versions of this. On the left, what we sort of regulate with conventional zoning, and the bigger the box, the more priority. and the greater extent to which the things in the biggest box become the organizing principle for the code, for the document itself. And on the right is the form-based code, so that we still regulate basically the same things. A conventional zoning code will have chapters or categories or sections organized by land use. Sometimes we call it a use-based code. So it has the residential rules, and then the single-family residential rules, and the multi-family residential rules, and the commercial rules, and the industrial rules, and so on. In a form-based code, the expectation is that land uses can be quite flexible. They're still regulated, just not to the same extent, and it's not the organizing principle. So in a form-based code, we ask, what kind of place is that? Is that a main street? Or is that a secondary street? Or some other kind of place? And then the rules are adjusted to where you are. So that's, fundamentally, we're doing the same thing. We're thinking about land use and density, about management, like hours of operation, or what you can and can't do with short-term rentals and those sorts of things. And we're thinking about physical form. But we're just putting a much bigger priority on form. Why do all that? The reason is because form-based codes can be more predictable. The building to street relationship I talked about results from knowing where you can build on a lot and vividly depicting that, where the buildings are meant to be located, where the parking is meant to be located, things like that. So it's basically about getting intentional about those relationships. I'll show an example illustrated on a corridor. This is in Michigan, where these two things, the public and private realm, both being worked on simultaneously. So the private properties are to the left and right of the red dashed lines. And the public property is the corridor in the middle, much like a Sam Rittenberg Road or a Savannah Highway or NCDOT streets. So what's illustrated here is what happens when you decide to redevelop the properties outside and then also coordinate your plan for transportation improvements and for access and for beautification within the rights-of-way so that they are coordinated with it. The whole idea is that if this is one of those places where you want to grow, but grow on the community's terms and grow your way out of your problems, you have to draw it first. And then we build the regulations around that. So this is used a lot of different ways. In historic districts, that's one of the ways we use form-based code. Another one is retrofitting suburbia. And one of the key ideas there is that we know it won't all change at once. It's going to change over time, kind of incrementally. So you have to set it up so that each thing that changes logically leads to the next. One of the things we can do with form-based codes is encourage new infill development to take a walkable form. So here's an example some of you know from our portfolio. We use that technique in Atlanta. Those row houses toward the back of the slide here are live-work units that required a new special provision in the Atlanta zoning code in order to make that possible. And then the document that regulates development there isn't just in the form of a book with long paragraphs and charts of numbers, but rather also vivid illustrations, including a map that says key things like where the build to lines or build to zones are located. This technique is being used in the state of South Carolina to great effect in places like Beaufort. If you've seen the progress taking place on Boundary Street as you drive into Beaufort. One of the things that happened is that first they adjusted their zoning regulations, and then they had a case to make to the state and federal government that they were doing their part as a city. It's the main part being regulating the development of private land in such a way that if there was public investment in the right-of-way, these would be synced up. And then as a result of having that plan, that code, they moved right to the front of the line for federal funding on the reconstruction of Boundary Street. So if you've always wanted the corridors themselves to get better, it doesn't just end with the private property owners putting one brick on top of another, nailing two sticks together until they build their buildings. It also depends on the action of the transportation agencies to change the corridors. Here's an example from Colorado where an old dead mall, deader than the Citadel Mall, was actually changed using form-based coding into a place that had real blocks and streets and addresses and doors and windows and balconies overlooking those streets. The because that's what's stipulated in the code. And this is an example of how they took the lost space, where it was basically a building poking out of a big parking lot and Target in the back, and they built it back. So it still has the large footprint users like the grocery store or the Target store. It also has fine-grained mix of uses, including housing. So much needed housing was provided by doing that. And Belmar turned out pretty well. Next, I'm just going to show you glimpses of the kinds of things that tend to show up in a form-based code. First, the most important, as I've been talking about a lot, building form standards. And those are illustrated to show the key components or the positions of things. It's meant to be kind of usable at a glance. You don't have to read the whole document from front to back to know what the rules are. You can turn to the page that applies to your property or your building type and see the rules at a glance. These codes tend to have maps, just like any zoning code, but they're broken down by the place types. So Main Street, for example, or neighborhood streets that I mentioned before. So we make maps, and those have a regulatory effect. Form-based codes tend to have architectural standards. There's much demand here, as we understand, for new and improved architectural standards. They tend to have standards for the streets, so that when the old dead mall parking lot is reconfigured to have real street-like streets, we can get streets that you really want, with street trees and sidewalks and the way they should be. And a common component in the table of contents of a form-based code is open space standards. So when we have the town square, here's how it's meant to be configured. We just put all that down on paper so that everybody knows what we're going for. I'll end on this. A couple of significant professional associations that think about these things went off and did a study of a great many places in America that have, over the last couple of decades, applied form-based codes. And they checked to see what had happened before and after, and how those places compared to their peer communities that didn't make that change. And here's some of what they found. I won't read you all of this, but a couple of them are pretty significant. A wider range of housing types. That means more different kinds of housing, but also different sizes and prices to own or rent, tend to occur when we have a form-based code. They saw a significant increase in tax revenue from the redevelopments that were done with that technique. Well, that revenue is what makes the wheels of government turn and makes things possible within your community. So if you're the city manager or the mayor and you're wondering how to put a new roof on City Hall or how to run a great parks department, well, those revenues are how you do it. So having that improve is a big deal. And then they found that measurements of quality of life, walkability, public health, these all went up and improved. So that report is called Zoned In, and we can share the link to it if you like and let you read it for yourself. See if you come to the same conclusion I did, which is this seems to work and we should do more of it. Steve?
Thanks, Victor. So we just want to turn our focus back to West Ashley, and again, the reason for why we're here tonight. And want to just note that our team is very familiar with the region. We've actually done a few different projects, ranging from Plan West Ashley just a few years ago, as well as Rethink Folly Road, and some of the work that Victor noted with Boundary Street out in Beaufort, as well as out in Port Royal. And just briefly touching on Plan West Ashley and some of the recommendations and findings from the report, you'll see that a lot of those are kind of aligning and very consistent with what we're looking at tonight, with growth areas along St. Rittenberg as well as along Savannah Highway. And a lot of the recommendations and insights that were taken from Plan West Ashley were then incorporated into the 2021 city plan. And just by show of hands, how many people here are familiar with this document? Awesome. Thank you. And then specifically within West Ashley, we know that it is comprised of a great series of neighborhoods, many of those connected by these commercial corridors that are located on some of the highest ground in West Ashley. But there's quite a few dated buildings that are in need of new investment. Fortunately, we have the West Ashley redevelopment area in the TIF district, and that is synthesized as part of the study area that we have. And then there was the report with Plan West Ashley that was formed with a lot of public engagement process, and that helped to identify several corridors and gateways that were prime opportunities for mixed-use development and for opportunities like we're talking about tonight. So as part of our analysis, we take a look at a lot of different data. We look from anything from existing zoning through future land use, take a look at elevation and topography, wetlands, flood zones, city-owned properties, community spaces and key points of interest in the area, as well as walkability and bikeability. It was interesting to find that from center to edge was basically 2 miles, or roughly a 10-minute bike ride, obviously in one direction. And as the connectivity of streets improves, the more achievable and attainable that is. It was just kind of another interesting finding in that with improved connectivity, we could actually realize some of that walkability and bikeability. We also take a look at other metrics, ranging from block size and building footprint sizes, building setbacks. We do, I think as Victor has mentioned before, doctors work with x-rays, and that's how they, conduct they help to come to their diagnoses. And for us, what that looks like are things like taking a look at the block and street network, and how does that compare to precedents and other areas that we're familiar with. And so we put them up against examples locally that maybe you're more familiar with, and you can take a look and see what do the block sizes look like, and how does that relate to the lifestyle and walkability in those neighborhoods. And so just kind of sifting through a few of these examples that we've taken a look at, these all being at the same scale. And I know we touched on Avondale, and we continue to hear from the community that this is a place that is very beloved. It's for its charm and for its but that there's areas for improvement still. That safety and walkability and safe crossing of the road and things like that can still be a challenge. So, are there opportunities to be able to recreate this, but on with some of the as part of I'm starting to lose it. As part of the corridor that we're looking at tonight. Similarly to the block and street network, we take a look at things like building footprint sizes. And as we can compare and contrast to other examples, we can see that along Sam Rittenberg, there's some very notable commercial centers. There's a mix of housing types in terms of single-family housing. Up to the northwest, you can see some more multifamily housing. We're taking a look at the clustering and densities as well. Another part of the work that we do is we put together these synoptic surveys, and really what this is the genetic DNA, or the genetic makeup of the different elements that make a place what it is. And so these are just a various set of examples and precedents that we take as part of our analysis for this project as well. So now we'll shift to the meat and potatoes of tonight, and the hands-on input. The stuff that we really want to focus on is getting engagement, getting feedback, getting direction, and a community vision from y'all. And so we have 2 exercises that we want everyone to focus on within your tables. The first is going to be a key ideas, and you'll see in the center of your table you've got one large map of the study area. We are going to have several table facilitators that will make sure they're kind of giving some direction and guidance so that you have some clear direction on what we're looking for. But these are the types of questions that we want to be asking. What are the opportunities or concerns about future development, whether it be building types, housing, mobility, green infrastructure? Are there specific locations within this study area that these apply? What are opportunities for new streets or needs for new open spaces? Are there uses that would make the area more complete, or where can these be located? And perhaps we even have individuals that have insight into questions like what regulatory barriers are there that are hindering the community vision? And then the second sketch, and we want to spend about 20 minutes on each of these different exercises, but on the second exercise, we've got a sketch discussion. And at each table, you have one of 3 sites that we have put together, basically a hypothetical future scenario. The first being at Sam Rittenberg and Ashley Hall Road, the second at Savannah Highway and Walpole Road, and the third more of a smaller site development at St. Andrews Boulevard and the West Ashley Bikeway. And with this, you'll see some of the key ideas and insights taken from Plan West Ashley that help to kind of guide the creative direction that you see in these sketches. And we take existing conditions that you'll be able to see on these papers and come up with what this could look like, potential future conditions. And don't think about this as being, the end goal, the end outcome for a particular site, but as a larger whole, this may exist at other intersections along the corridor as well. But again, what we want to focus on is this representative of a future vision that you'd like to see? How do the building heights compare to what you may have in mind? What about the relationship of the buildings to the street? The setbacks, the massing. Are there things that you would change? Architecturally, are there things that you like or dislike? Please continue to use your markers, point those out, make notes. We encourage you to get your thoughts down on paper. So with the second exercise, again, does this potential development match your vision for the area? What would you change and why? Give some thoughts on building types, building heights, setbacks, parking, new streets that could emerge within these private parcels as well, open spaces, areas for stormwater retention, and anything else that you may have on your mind. The second site at Savannah Highway and Wapu Road, again, just comparing existing conditions to potential future conditions. And third, the smaller development site along the bikeway, taking a look at the potential for development and what that could look like as well. We want to make sure every table leaves about 5-10 minutes towards the end of the session to try and gather some consensus around what your 3 big ideas were that emerge as part of the table. And I think that tends to come very, very easy as we work towards this, but just start sharing those ideas. We will have a timer or some slides up here to give you an indication of how much time you have left. And when we get down to about that 5 minutes, we just want to encourage everybody to start getting those thoughts down. And then as part of that, I just want to note that going back to the report back, so somebody from each table will be asked to come on up and just share those 3 ideas. Feel free to bring up your map if you've made some notes, or just your single piece of paper if you'd like, just to be able to speak to those 3 points. And then we will make sure we capture everyone's insights. Victor, I'll hit it over to you for the ground rules.
There aren't many rules, because it's really actually pretty easy. Like basic brainstorming, focus first on what you want to see, not necessarily on how to get it done. Just tell us the idea, and then we can work with you to figure out what the tools or costs or the sorts of things that will work from the things that might not work as well. That's fine. Just focus on what you want to see. Don't get into arguments about exactly how to do it. Second, I suggest building up ideas, not tearing each other's ideas down. So as tempting as it might be to leap across the table and grab your neighbor by the neck and say, "That's the dumbest thing I ever heard," don't do it. Promise. So, exactly, we're working on that. But instead, just take a pause and say, okay, based on what you just said, here's how I would improve upon the idea if it were up to me. We ask you to write your ideas down, put them on the paper, because when you just say them, it might be lost. We might not all hear it, or you can be lost. But if you write it down, draw a picture of it, then it'll be recorded. The more visual you do that, the better. So, arguments are okay. Probably this room is going to get a little noisy. Argue if you must, but argue with your pencil. In other words, draw your idea, don't just say it. And then last, no speeches, except us, and we're done. That's the end of that. And have fun, relax and have fun with it. Now, one thing we need to do, the folks in this far table, you are in the plaid shirt and the green shirt, your table's not set up with maps and all the tools. So what we'd like to do is have you all find your way to one of the many empty chairs at the other tables. We'll just, and then it should work out just about right. And if we still need to start another table, with some more people coming, what have you, we'll pull out what we need to get that done. Okay? Are you ready? When I say go? When I say go. Go.
It's okay. All right, so if you look at our maps, you can tell we have a priority, which is green space. and bike trails. We use green and purple for our bike trails. I love it so much, I made my hands green. So we were kind of focused on that and using some of the existing space that's here to create, it just so happened that the people at our table are all people that are bikers, and we want to be able to bike to different parts of West Ashley without feeling like we're going to die. So, I mean, we had people who live up here near the North Bridge who like can't even get to the restaurants that are half a mile from their house. So we focused on putting like the idea of in key places, putting places where we can cross over Sam Rittenberg, and then also looking, we had Sam Rittenberg, so focusing specifically on that, putting in trails, using those big empty parking lots, not necessarily to create tall buildings as much as kind of what the proposal was, but to use some of that space to put in multimodal trail and trees with that. And then if you want to use the single-story strip malls and build those up, that's fine, but not quite as many buildings, more, because I think we felt like at least the next several years, like you need Sam Rittenberg, well, I mean, people are going to go through Sam Rittenberg to get to the rest of West Ashley. And so not trying to fight that as much as adding extra. So let me see my 3. So bike trails, and bike trails that connect to each other. As we all know, if you bike or walk in West Ashley, there are great trails here and great trails there, and one over there, and you're just supposed to magically fly in between them. So making sure that they connect. So our second point is just to use those parking lots as a practical space to put that. One other idea that we talked about was just the fact that it's very difficult to get from Sam Rittenberg and Ashley River and Savannah Highway. You have to go way around to get to different things. So something to connect from Sam Rittenberg to Savannah Highway. We have Magnolia and Wapu, but again, maybe bike ways to do that. And then one person on our table, this is a totally different take, but I want to make sure that his voice is heard as well. He said, you know, this was built in the 50s and 60s. It was built as an automobile-centric thing, and to kind of embrace that some in ways that are more beautiful than they are now. So maybe putting in a drive-through in one of those big empty parking lots, or not a drive-through, but a drive-in movie theater, and doing some other things. And I didn't get all the specifics, so you can ask him, but some things to make it, he mentioned specifically some examples that he's seen in San Diego to make it look kind of more classic and retro. And so it still has an inviting feel to it, but also acknowledges that automobiles will use it. So a different aspect than what we had focused on, but again, both voices that I wanted to make sure I heard. Those are our ideas.
Let's hear it for table 1.
Okay, hello everyone. All right, so we've got some scribbles up here. I think this is right. Yep. So we had there are 3 big ideas for our section. And the first one is bike access, safety, connectivity. So going off at table 1, we had several bikers at our table 2. So we talked a lot about that. To try not to monopolize the conversation, because not everybody does ride a bike at our table. Or respect for that. So bike access, and just like Group 1 said, we have great facilities that aren't necessarily accessible to each other. So how are we getting in between the bikeway and the greenway? How are we getting between the bikeway and all these places that we want to redevelop? So key corridors. So we talked about Wapu Road as, I'm totally disoriented on this map. Wapu Road is a potential corridor for connectivity. We also talked about this kind of imaginary line of getting towards Avondale in that area through the neighborhoods in a safe way, like talk about bike boulevards and some of those ideas. The second bullet point I have is cute. So we want a place that is cute, meaning less storage units and less gas stations and more places you actually want to visit. So places like restaurants, bars, public space, green space, places you can take a family, all that good stuff. So maybe less, places you drive to, get out of your car and leave, and more places you kind of stay and mingle and kind of gather together in community. And then I added like a sense of place to that. Like, here in West Ashley, you walk outside, you could be in a dilapidated mall anywhere in America. So we want to embrace that West Ashley is unique and beautiful, it has historic value, and create a sense of place here. And then the third bullet point I have is a mix of uses. So this kind of goes along with number 2, but the actual uses that are going on. So not only just having a park that you might drive to, get out of your car, let your dog run around and then go home, but a park that you could go have dinner afterwards and then take a walk in the park, that kind of thing. Housing, we know that the price of housing is really expensive, especially in West Ashley, and so housing options, but not housing that adds more and more cars on the road, but housing that is oriented to places that people can work and live and not necessarily have to rely on a car to get everywhere. And I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. What's your name? Graham's team.
Hello. So I'm from table 4. The 3 main ideas we looked at are all around density and transportation. So the first idea that we had, first broad idea is that density is okay if it's done in the right context and in the proximity to downtown. So downtown is a large urban area. There's a lot of demand to live there. There's a lot of demand to work there. It makes a lot more sense to build higher density near downtown. So in the inner ring of West Ashley compared to, say, Goose Creek or the outer fringe of Somerville. So that was one of the things we looked at. Also along certain corridors, it makes more sense to have a higher density. It depends on the context of that corridor. Sandridge made a lot of sense because it's a major transportation corridor and is on a higher elevation compared to the rest of West Ashley. Other areas make less sense. It's all on a contextual basis. The second point we looked at is that mixed-use development can be done very well if it is done right. And what I want to point to here is this picture that's drawn, if everyone can see it. This was just a concept done along Highway 61 where it meets the bikeway. This is not an actual plan. But what you can see with this building is that it is mixed use. On the first floor you have commercial development, you have umbrellas, you have like little curtains on the top. And above that you have a large apartments, residential. You can also tell from the architecture in this drawing that you have balconies, you have a lot of windows. You don't have a large block, it's more of there's a lot more form to the building, it's not like a big rectangle. If you do the architecture right for a building, it can work very well at a high density or as a mixed-use project. Our third point was about transportation. We need safe and functional transportation networks and corridors. One of the biggest issues with Charleston right now is our traffic. Something that we talked about was expanding in transportation, mass transit. We have low country rapid transit connecting downtown and North Charleston. That's currently in the works. We talked about expanding that to West Ashley, either along the San Rittenberg corridor or going from downtown extending into West Ashley, starting downtown, going to the Citadel Mall, then along Common. We also talked about the need for, I think every table has mentioned this so far, improved bike infrastructure so that you can make shorter trips within West Ashley safely. And the bikeway and the greenway, as they currently exist, are already great examples. We can just expand that network. So in particular with Highway 61, we talked about taking some of the unused parking along that street, converting it to a wider mixed-use path, converting it to something like bus lanes. Any optimal use, optimization of that space we have along the right of way would be helpful. Thank you.
Good evening. We are at table 5. We echoed a lot of the themes that have been expressed so far. We looked at housing, transportation, and the experiences of people living in the space as the core areas we focused on. Starting with housing, one of the things that we were pretty unanimous on was the importance of affordable and attainable housing to come to this area. And where we were looking at specifically was at the corner of Wapu and Sit-Down Highway. And we were commenting on this unique opportunity that we have here where these major roadways come together. We've got 2 major bike and pedestrian facilities in the West Ashley Bikeway and the Greenway in close proximity to this, and how this is a great place for people to live in a mixed-use capacity. We talked a lot about other examples like the Low Line and Atlanta's Beltline as opportunities where people can walk and live and play in spaces that are welcoming to them and incorporate public uses, kind of like this park over here where the Fireman's Memorial is. As we expanded outward through here, we were talking about the need for greater connectivity and transportation that is safe for the people using it. Specifically, the concerns that a mother at our table had for her children who are learning to drive on 61, and the need for better solutions there that can ensure their safety and her peace of mind. That was something that we explored a great deal with various options, from installing a larger infrastructure fix like a flyway through here, which was one suggestion. The other suggestion was looking at opportunities that can calm traffic, like bringing the development closer to the street, squeezing the road in, and creating dedicated transit lanes through here, which can cause traffic calming measures in those areas. Like the previous group, we also talked about opportunities for rapid transit and enhanced transit opportunities on Savannah Highway in particular, because that was our purview with this area. But we also spent a lot of time on Civil Mall, thinking about that as a center point of the community, having it be more of an open-air mall or a walkable place with a tree canopy, and looking at increasing the tree canopy for all of these parts of the corridor as a part of that. And we were just starting to dive into water management as we ran out of time, but increasing the amount of green space, the amount of trees, and decreasing the amount of asphalt and permeable surfaces is where we were heading with what would have been our 4th point.
The ones that don't have numbers, so you're numbering them.
Hi, my name is Fran Gray. I'm speaking for Table 6. Our first big idea was just really pretty basic, and that is to improve the overall appearance so people realize we care about where we live here in West Ashley. I was sitting at a table with a number of folks that have lived in the West Ashley, specifically the Sam Rickford corridor for quite a while, feel largely ignored. And so this, just being here today has been really wonderful, I think, to talk about the things we want to see in the area. The improvements of the overall appearance, that would include streetscaping, bike paths, we do like bikes, lighting, just an overall change along the San Britton corridor. 2 would be no more huge parking lots. I think you're hearing that a second time. Specifically, mixed use. Our group, we are not against mixed use. We're not against multi-level buildings, but we want it to be done smartly, cutely, as someone said. We suggested these mixed-use places have gathering places. 2 of our group members have moved here from Charlotte, where they're familiar with a number of these happening. We talked about along Coleman Boulevard, there's a multifamily development, the Boulevard, where, of course, the first floor is retail. The retail's been largely successful, and then, upper floors are apartments. Also, we brought up a boutique hotel. That would be really neat. We have no hotels right now in San Britton Boulevard, and elevated retail. I think we can all agree there's a lot of room for improvement along the San Britton corridor. So we just would love to see more retail opportunities, wine shops, places to buy fresh flowers. That's not Publix. And then our third was connectivity. And we would just love to be able to, not that we're going to bike every day, but we want to be able to safely bike or walk places to eat, drink, and be merry. Thank you.
Hello, I am Carlton, table 7. Our 3 big ideas was turning San Brittonburg into more of a streetscape boulevard that's focused more on multimodal transportation. That could be some nicer, wider sidewalks. People have mentioned bus rapid transit to tie into the low country rapid transit. Number 2 was creating a buffer between car space and people space. So buildings are not right up against the road, but they're not so far back that there's this giant sea of empty, dilapidated parking lot. An example of where that's done well on Savannah Highway would be like the Honda dealership and the Cadillac dealership. An example where that's done not so well would be the shopping center where Whole Foods is. Those buildings are right up against the sidewalk, and it's just a little claustrophobic. And then finally, we wanted to see new environments that people can kind of get out and stay a while. So for gathering place, these could be anything from a little pocket park to a cafe or a little coffee shop with some outdoor dining. So, yeah, thanks.
That's the last one? You got one? Okay. Well, it's been a long night, so I'll go fast, but I just want to give you a couple parting observations. Listening to all the conversations at the tables, walking around, was like an amazing privilege. And as you just heard in the reporting back from all the individual tables, there was a tremendous overlap. So I think the folks that are here from the city are saying, yeah, that's not surprising, right? Because these conversations have been bubbling up for a while. A lot of the things that were called for fall in a couple of categories that are intriguing to me. A lot of the things that were discussed were creations or improvements to public infrastructure. The stuff between the buildings and public rights of way. The improvement of the bike network was mentioned several times. Planting street trees came up several times. And those are activities that are usually done independent of the land development regulations, not done by zoning. Now, to the extent that a large property is redeveloped and they put new streets in, the street standards in the new zoning can affect or control how those streets are built. But just when we say, gosh, wouldn't it be great if the DOT would fix the crossing on St. Andrews of the Maryville Bikeway, which I changed them for its existing conditions and told it every opportunity I get, so I just did it again. But that's really not zoning that's going to fix that. So that's a category that's really important because we recorded and captured all of that. And we'll make sure that it gets heard, that you brought those things up. But in the zoning, there's this second category of things that I already mentioned. And that is things that are already legal, but are for some reason or another not there. Like it's legal, for example, to build a boutique hotel. People said that would be great. It's actually legal to build cube, technically. But somehow they haven't done it. Or maybe they're about to and we just don't know it yet. But they haven't done it yet. And so I think we know from that part of the conversation that it won't be enough to simply improve how we regulate, but we also have to inspire the property owners and the investors to do the things they could have done already if they had wanted to. And one of the ways we can inspire them is by removing impediments that might have slowed them down. Unnecessary requirements, for example, or prohibitions against mixed use and things like that. That can be fixed. But then building public infrastructure of a better kind and quality, whether it's the city or SCDOT or the Parks Conservancy or the Parks Department, it doesn't matter which entity it is, if they build infrastructure that inspires the owners of the adjacent addresses, that's another way to inspire change. But we may also have to look beyond merely getting out of their way with regulations that are unnecessary, and think about ways to add incentives. Developers, I don't even really like the word very much. We prefer neighborhood founders. What do y'all think? Isn't that better? Developers do the deals they can actually do. Like they can get financing, they have tenants, it physically works, they can get permission. That's the most important one probably. And they don't just do whatever we might want, they do what they can actually do. So to make sure that it's possible first, and then to move from possible to probable, we'll have to add inducements. Incentives, they can do more with less, help you as a community build your way out of your problems by physically changing things, which I would probably not come suggest for your average single-family residential street or cul-de-sac somewhere in West Ashley, because change is not what many people are looking for there. But people do seem to be looking for change on these commercial corridors. And the conversation we overheard tonight reinforces the decision to put this effort in form-based coding to work in at least a pilot way on these locations. So that's my reactions, and I wanted to thank you for that. I have an idea, if you'll indulge me. Can we make a great big group photograph of everybody who came tonight? How about if we just, on this side of the room, just make a big group, and the tall ones in the back and the short ones in the front. Let's make a team photo so that none of you can deny you were here. You're one of the ones in the back row. Should we get the lights? All right,